Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro meets with promoters of mission Long Live Venezuela, My Beloved Homeland, and highlighted the battle against fascism waged by the Venezuelan people during a phone conversation he held Friday with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Honduran judiciary debates on constitutionality of employment and economic development zones. In Lebanon, the death toll rose to 12 people after the launch on Friday of an aggression against the southern suburb of Beirut, the Lebanese capital, by the Israeli regime. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro meets with promoters of mission Long Live Venezuela, My Beloved Homeland, and highlighted the battle against fascism waged by the Venezuelan people during a phone conversation he held Friday with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. During the event, the Venezuelan president expressed his concern for the advance of fascism and neo-fascism in Latin America and Europe, and rejected the destabilization attempts against his country by the United States and the far right. Maduro also highlighted the expression of hatred and violence that threaten the peace of the nation. The Venezuelan president also stressed that culture is also a weapon to fight fascism.
There is a debate in the world. I even spoke today with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Secretary General Antonio Guterres. We spoke for about 15 minutes, and I fully explained to him the battle we're waging against fascism. We have to call it by its name. It is the devil. Let no one sugarcoat the expressions of intolerance, of persecution, which are typical of fascist projects. We have seen outbreaks of fascism in Europe, practically fascism, neo-fascism, and similar expressions. It is an incredible thing, Ernesto and Hector. It is impressive how neo-fascism, fascism, and its similar expressions are spreading in Spain, cornering democracy in Spain and in Italy, seizing political power in Germany with Nazi expressions reivindicating Hitler, and stop counting. And the whole international fascists and neo-fascists are targeting the jewel of the crown in South America, Venezuela.
On the other hand, the Venezuelan head of state affirmed that his country is on alert in the face of the constant fascist harassments carried out by the far right.
And we all have to be aware of the moment we're living. Venezuela is fighting for its right to peace. Venezuela is fighting for its right to exist, for its right to the future, for its right to happiness. These are key elements: peace, future, happiness, and we're facing great threats and harassment. There has been a brutal harassment, Ernesto, against artists, a harassment that we already know. We have already seen this movie before. We already saw this movie in the past, when the first outbreaks of intolerance and hatred of the far right, when the far right was called opposition, and they had the first outbreaks back in 2002. Remember how many artists were persecuted, Cristobal, just for being next to Chavez and for singing to the fatherland.
The government of Venezuela rejected the presentation to the Human Rights Council of the United Nations organization of a report drafted by an illegitimate mission created by the Lima Group, which it accused of following orders from the United States. Through a communique, the Venezuelan Chancellery described the document as vulgar and assured that its only objective is to comply with orders from Washington to apply the U.S. policy of a change of government in Venezuela. Caracas considers that the permanence of this mission of the Lima Group demonstrates the structural failures of the United Nations system, with institutions that have become instrument of coercion and blackmail of sovereign powers. The Chancellery denounced that the report intends to turn the victims of fascism and the Venezuelan extreme right into victimizers. In Venezuela, the President Nicolás Maduro held on Friday a phone conversation with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, in which they have addressed the political situation of the country after the destabilization attempts from the extreme sectors of the far right. In an official statement that the President of Venezuela informed, he held a fraternal conversation by phone with Secretary General Antonio Guterres in which they discussed the global political situation, especially that of Venezuela. During the conversation, President Maduro detailed the aggressions undertaken against the Venezuelan institutions after far-right wings' attempts to disregard the election results of July 28th, a violence that left a death toll of 27 people killed. For his part, Secretary General Guterres expressed that the United Nations is against any intervention in internal affairs that affect the sovereignty and self-determination of nations and advocates for the dialogue among Venezuelans. Both dignitaries agreed to support the consultations with different political, social and economic sectors promoted by the Bolivarian government, looking to the future and dispelling any threat of destabilization in Venezuela. Venezuelan Minister of Communication and Information Freddy Ñáñez pointed out that the United States Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, and countries which are against Venezuela are behind the recent attacks against this country's sovereignty.
Evidently, it is a CIA operation. Evidently, it has the footprints of a CIA operation. And now we know that it is an operation that has been orchestrated by several other countries, and that while some of them are positioning their narrative, while some of them are putting pressure through propaganda, others are working on the scene. But nobody is disconnected from what is happening in Venezuela. We can say that none of the countries that have spoken against Venezuela are dissociated from what has been attempted against our country.
On the other hand, Ñáñez warned that if a civil war breaks out in Venezuela, it will spread across Latin America, an imperialist plan with the natural resources of the region.
A civil war in Venezuela, Karen, would be the beginning of a war that is going to spread throughout Latin America, and that we don't know very well what that war would lead to. We don't know very well how it might end or when it might end. What we do know is that a civil war in Venezuela would be the beginning of the end of what we know today as Latin America, because all the nation states, regardless of who is governing them, those nation states are in the crosshairs, they are in the plans of the Southern Command. Because beneath our feet, in Venezuela, in Colombia, in Chile, in Argentina, in Panama, in Bolivia, that is to say, what we have under our feet from the Rio Grande to the Patagonia are natural resources that the empire covets, that the empire needs.
Dominican Republic authorities rejected the rupture of diplomatic relations with Venezuela and condemned President Luis Abinader's position. The Dominican President Abinader has maintained a hostile position towards the Bolivarian government since the recent victory of Nicolás Maduro in the Venezuelan presidential elections of last July 28th. Different members of the Dominican government, among them Minister Miguel Mejia, have considered Abinader's position as ungrateful in view of the debt that exists with the South American country. In this context, the President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, announced the cease of diplomatic relations with the Caribbean nation after interfering statements made by his Dominican counterpart and also for his support to the thief of a Venezuelan airplane by the U.S.
I believe that this is the most critical moment in the history of the relations between the Dominican Republic and Venezuela, which have very deep roots. Because Patricio Juan Pablo Duarte was welcomed in Venezuela, where he died, and that is a historical fact that generates an eternal debt of gratitude with the Venezuelan people, beyond any disagreement that may exist in the governments in office. The most critical moment is this one because this is where the rupture of relations has taken place, rupture which was not caused by Venezuela. Venezuela decided to break up relations as a result of the ingratitude of the current ruler regarding the generous actions taken by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Honduran judiciary debates on constitutionality of employment and economic development zones. The head of the bench of the Liberty and Refundation Party, Rafael Sarmiento, considers that the Supreme Court of Justice has the opportunity to determine the constitutionality of the employment and economic development zones. During the meeting, the plenary of magistrates will also debate the political amnesty for the ex-mayor of San Pedro Sula, Rodolfo Padilla Sonser. Meanwhile, 4 magistrates of the court announced their participation via virtual means in the controversial plenary meeting convened by the president of the judicial body, Rebecca Raquel Obando, to settle the legal status of these instances. The Zones of Employment and Economic Development, (ZEDE), is a project promoted by American and European investors that suppress the sovereignty of Honduras by granting full international domain in these delimited areas. Promoted by the former President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who is currently incarcerated in Washington for drug trafficking, and of which it is assured that one of the zones was in charge of a personal assistant of the Republican Senator Marco Rubio. The negative effects of the employment and development zones in Honduras include the violation of the Constitution and the international treaties subscribed. Likewise, the people are victims of the expropriation of their natural resources, militarization, and precarious employment. On the other hand, there was no prior and informed consultation with the inhabitants before the installation of the ZEDES project. Argentina's government policies have left more than 450,000 new unemployed during the last 6 months of 2024. The National Institute of Statistics and Census of Argentina, through a report, detailed that unemployment affects 5.7% of the economically active population. The increase in the unemployment rate coincides with an economic recession prolongation, explained by a significant drop in consumption and cuts in public spending, which is one of the fiscal adjustment measures implemented by President Javier Milei. Reports indicated that Buenos Aires leads the unemployment rate with 8.3%, followed by the Northeast region with 7.8%, while some producers recorded a drop in consumption of around 30%. In Panama, social and environmental organizations rejected the construction project of the port of Baru because of its impact on the local ecosystem. Different experts assured that a large part of the area where the construction of this project is planned has mangrove swamps that protect the region.
We have the city of David on this side, which is protected by these mangroves from any phenomena that may come from the sea to land. This is our first barrier. They are carbon sinks. David's mangroves have captured about 400 tons of carbon per hectare. They are very productive and are a great ally against climate change. They also provide all of the stock of fisheries in the region. In Chiriquí, if I'm not wrong, there are more than 1,000 registered craft boats.
With the lawsuit filed by 6 organizations last September the 5th, asking the court to declare this departmental study illegal because the study and the evaluation process of the study did not analyze all the negative impacts that the project could have. One of those impacts is on the water resource. This is a 124 hectares project with multiple uses. They have residential areas, hotels. They are going to require an important demand of water, both in the construction phase as well as in the operation phase. What the study does not resolve is where the water is going to come from to maintain the project. The answer that is repeatedly given in the evaluation process is that the project is going to obtain it from a third party, but it does not identify or give a list of potential suppliers of the resource.
We want development and progress, but we also have to preserve. But you, as authorities, also have to share what we're trying to make you understand.
On Friday, the representatives of the popular movements were received by Pope Francis in commemoration of the 10th anniversary of the First World Meeting of Organizations of Humble, Excluded and Disenfranchised Workers of the World. The slogan, "Planting a Flag in the Face of Dehumanization," will feature the intervention of the Supreme Pontiff as well as a symposium with popular movements and the Catholic Church. At the headquarters of the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, during his first intervention, Pope Francis asked to remain in the struggle for and with the poor, and reiterated that as long as the problems of the poor are not solved, the problems of the world will not be solved either.
They carry out countless works even with the most precarious means, sometimes without any help from the state and sometimes under persecution. I accompany them on their way. I still believe, as I said in Bolivia, that not only the future of the poor of the earth depends on their community actions, but also the future of all humanity. Yes, we all depend on the poor, also the rich. I said it at the beginning of the pontificate, and I quote myself, "As long as the problems of the poor are not radically solved by renouncing the absolute autonomy of the markets and finances, and by attacking the structural causes of inequality, the problems of the world will not be solved. And ultimately, any problem whatsoever. Inequality is the root of all social evils."
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Lebanon, death toll rose to 12 and at least 66 wounded after the Israeli regime's army attacked the southern suburbs of Beirut. The Lebanese Ministry of Health informed through a communique that search and rescue operations are continuing under the rubble. The Secretary General of Hezbollah, for his part, declared that Israel's actions had crossed all red lines and that a response to such an attack would be carried out shortly. The event comes a few days after the Israeli terrorist attacks against Lebanon, who executed simultaneous explosions of thousands of electronic devices in southern suburbs of Beirut, southern Lebanon, and the Bekaa, killing dozens of people and wounding thousands. In Palestine, an Israeli attack caused the death of more than 13 people in the last 24 hours in several residential areas of the Gaza Strip. Local media reported that the Israeli aerial aggression was against the Gaza City and indicated that emergency teams are searching for survivors under the rubble. Also, Israeli forces demolished several residential buildings in southeastern part of the Palestinian enclave and destroyed multiple structures in the northern part of the Al-Nusayrat refugee camp. The frequent Israeli aggression against Gaza since October 7, 2023, has caused the death of 41,272 Palestinians, mostly women and children, and left over 95,000 wounded. In Afghanistan, the Taliban government denounced that there are plans to start an economic war in order to break the Afghan people. The Deputy Minister of Religious Affairs, Sar Mohammad Haqqani, stated that it is the responsibility of the Taliban government to establish initiatives to boost trade, industry, generate jobs and guarantee more opportunities and quality of life for the people. In this context, the Chamber of Commerce and Investment said that self-sufficiency is only possible if the government takes measures to promote investment to enable economic growth and development in the country. In Central Europe, storm Boris leaves at least 24 people dead and around 1,000 displaced due to floodings. Meteorological authorities reported that 250 millimeters of rain fell in the last 24 hours, affecting countries such as Romania, Austria, Poland, the Czech Republic and Italy. Meanwhile, local authorities have enabled schools and sports centers as shelters for those most affected and are urging some of them to stay on the upper floors of their homes or abandon them due to the flooding. In the meantime, authorities are distributing humanitarian aid and emergency services while working on the cleaning and recovery of the damaged areas. In Austria, the insurance association VVO reported that floods caused by Storm Boris caused major losses in the country. The VVO estimated in a report that in a worst-case scenario, the damage could even exceed 1 billion euros. Regional authorities informed that 12 localities in Lower Austria remained inaccessible by road or with limited access. The most devastated area of the country is Lower Austria, the largest and second most populated federal state in the country, declared a disaster area because of the floods that have occurred after the torrential rains of the weekend, where at least 6 people died as a consequence. In recent days, some 68,000 emergency personnel have been deployed throughout Austria to help in the areas most affected by the floods. An unpublished unknown short work attributed to Mozart was found in the German city of Leipzig under the title Ganz klein Nachtmusik, which means very little night music. According to researchers, the short composition was found during the compiling work on at least the latest edition of the Kochel catalog, considered a reference work on Mozart's music oeuvre. Experts believe the composition dates back to the mid to late 1760s, when Mozart was between 10 and 13 years old. According to Leipzig's library authorities, the work consists of 7 miniature movements for a string trio lasting about 12 minutes. It will be premiered on Saturday at Leipzig's Opera House. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.